Hey there, thanks for joining me today. This is Laura Lynn with Keep Inking Up. I'm an independent demonstrator for Stampin' Up! In San Antonio, Texas. And in today's video, I'm going to try something a little different. I'd like to make two cards at one time. One that is for the casual crafter who has maybe a couple of different colors of cardstock and a couple of different colors of ink and maybe some twine or some linen thread. And then another card of the same design, but just stepped up a little bit with someone who's more avid crafter who has more tools and supplies. So we're going to see how this goes. I apologize ahead of time if it's going to get a little bit long, but we're going to just try it out. Both cards are going to be using the Celebrate Sunflowers stamp set that is new in our 2020-2021 annual catalog. I just love this stamp set. I love the bundle, but we're not going to be using the dies today. We're just going to be using the stamp set. I'm going to go ahead and put that aside. For both cards, we are going to be using a crumb cake card base. So I have a half a sheet of cardstock that is 8.5 by 5.5. So we're going to fold this in half and burnish it with our bone folder. I wanted to mention that the bone folder was a tool that I did not purchase right away when I started stamping more than 20 years ago. I did not buy a bone folder right away. I waited a couple of years. So you don't have to have a bone folder. Actually, if you don't have a bone folder but you have a pair of scissors, you can always use the handle of the scissors to get a nice crisp crease as well. But I do recommend getting a bone folder. I got one. This one is probably about 18 years old. The Stampin' Up! Logo is completely worn off, but it still works really well. So it's a really good investment. It's only $7, so it's a really good investment that'll last many, many years. So that's one card base, but I'm going to do the exact same thing for my other card, trying to keep my pieces here. So again, I'll fold this in half and burnish with my bone folder. Okay, and then we're going to do some stamping on these two card bases. I'm going to be using the large leaf image from the Celebrate Sunflowers stamp set, and I'm going to be using crumb cake ink because we're stamping on crumb cake cardstock, and I just want a really subtle background. That's one of the things that first attracted me to Stampin' Up! More than 20 years ago was their coordination between their ink and their cardstocks. Not very many companies were doing that at that time. More companies are doing that now because they realize it's such an advantage to do that. And Stampin' Up! Has expanded that coordination to include embellishments and designer series paper. So everything coordinates really well. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up, and I'm going to stamp this leaf image in the bottom right corner. I'm going to stamp one leaf, 2, and 3, and then I'm going to do the same thing up at the top. 1, 2, oops, and 3. I'm going to do the same thing on the other card. 1, 2, 3, and again at the bottom we'll do 1, 2, 3. Okay, so both of those look the same at the moment. I'm going to go ahead and close this up, get this out of the way. Now next I'm going to bring in a piece of colored cardstock. You could do this in any color. I'm using Misty Moonlight because that just happens to be my color, I guess, of the week. I just love this Misty Moonlight. It's one of our new in colors that'll be around for 2 years. And this piece is 1.5 by 5.5. And before I attach this to my card, I want to add a little bit of linen thread. Now hopefully even a casual crafter will have some linen thread. This piece is let's see, it's about 14 inches that I doubled over, and I'm going to attach this to my piece of Misty Moonlight with some glue dots. So I'm just going to stick my ends of my linen thread onto some glue dots. Make sure that both pieces are in there. Then I can pull those glue dots up, and I'll put about in the middle of the cardstock, and then I'll wrap it around to glue the other side down. The glue sticking to me. Okay, so it's about in the center, doesn't have to be precise. And now I can add this piece to my card base, and I'm going to use liquid glue. I love liquid glue because it gives me a little bit of wiggle room. You don't need much. It's really strong adhesive. And I'm going to use my grid paper to help me line this up. Grid paper is not a demonstrator only item. Customers can order it as well, and I will include links to all of the products that I used in the description of this video below, so if you would like to purchase anything. I'm going to use my grid paper, and I'm going to put this at about 1 inch from the bottom of the card, so I can line that up so it's nice and straight. I'll hold that down for just a couple of seconds. And then I'll set that aside and we can work on the other one. Now for the other one, I stepped it up a little bit, and I wanted to use the Tasteful Textiles 3D embossing folder. I love this embossing folder. And this is what it looks like when you emboss it, but to step it up even more, I added Misty Moonlight ink to my embossing folder and then ran it through. And isn't that amazing? I love that texture. The texture is already pretty. Without any ink, but you add the ink and it's just a wow. So I think that's fabulous. So I'm going to use that. So again, I'm going to grab a piece of the same size linen thread, and I'll go back to my glue dots. Oops. And I'll stick the ends of the linen thread into the glue dots. Oops. There we go. Pick up the glue dots. Oops. That one doesn't want to grab hold. Well, there we go. So I'll stick that in the middle, on the back, wrap it around, and adhere that one down. And you can adjust it as you need to. I just like the way that that adds even more texture against that texture. Just lovely. And again, we'll add that on to our card base with liquid glue. Now this is even more important to use liquid glue because it gets into the crevices of any kind of embossed piece. So I always use liquid glue whenever I'm adhering a piece that has been embossed with any folder. And again, I'll use my grid paper to align this, to get this up like that. Hold that down for a second. Okay, so already you can see these two cards are very similar. They have the same design, but one is stepped up a little bit with that added texture. So I'm going to set those aside while we work on the next. Let's see. I'll put them there. Okay, while we work on the next couple of pieces. For my Casual Crafter card, I've got a piece of Very Vanilla that is 3 inches by 4 inches. And for my stepped up card, I have a piece of Very Vanilla that I've cut out using the largest of the scalloped stitched rectangles from the Stitched So Sweetly dies. So I've used this one right here. So I've got those two pieces. We'll do one at a time, and I'm going to stamp using the large sunflower from the Celebrate Sunflowers. And I'm going to ink that up with the Misty Moonlight ink. So it'll go with the Misty Moonlight paper that we have on our cards. And for a large stamp like this, I like to leave the stamp face up. That way I can, when I ink it, I can see if I've got good ink coverage. That looks good and inked, so I'm going to go ahead and stamp that on my corner here. Make sure I get a good impression. That looks lovely. Then I'm going to ink it up again. That looks good. And I'm going to rotate my paper, and I'm going to fill in right here. That looks good. And I'm going to do it one more time. Right there. Okay, that looks awesome. Oh, I got a little smudge there. It's okay. It's a handmade card. It makes it unique. Okay, so now we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to put that aside for a second. We're going to do the same thing on this piece. So I'll stamp this. again. And I'll do it one more time. Okay. All right, I'm going to close up this ink pad for now. We're not, you know what? I'll go ahead and do some more stamping. So those are our two pieces. This one is for the Casual Crafter card, and this one is stepped up a little bit using a die cut for the Avid Crafter card. But now I'm going to get ready to do the sentiment. So I have a little piece of very vanilla cardstock. This is 3/4 of an inch by 2 inches. And I have Thinking of You sentiment, and this comes from the Blossoms in Bloom stamp set. It has a lot of sentiments, very simple font that looks great. So I'm going to ink that up in the Misty Moonlight, and I will, pardon my head, I'm going to try to get this as straight as possible. Okay, that's great. Now I can go ahead and close up this ink. And while I'm looking at this sentiment, I'm going to go ahead and fishtail the end with my paper snips. You don't have to have a punch to do a fishtail. All you need to do is find the center and snip up into the center, and then go from the corner to that point, and then from the other corner to that point. And just like that, oops, you've created a banner end without a punch. So I'm going to put that piece there with that, put that out of the way. Let's go ahead and assemble the Casual Crafter card. This, remember, was 3 inches by 4 inches, and I have a mat of Misty Moonlight that is 3 1/4. I believe it's 3 1/4 by 4 1/4. Yes, 3 1/4 by 4 1/4. Okay, so I'm going to glue this with my multi-purpose glue. Onto my mat. I can wiggle it around to make sure I get it nice and centered, as close to centered as possible. Then I'm going to flip that over, and I'm going to use some Stampin' Dimensionals and put one on each corner. I'll take off those backings. And stick that on my card. Now what I want to do is I want to have about equal distance from the bottom and the right hand side. Approximate, it doesn't have to be perfect. We're just going to eyeball it. That looks good right there. Okay, then I'm going to take my sentiment and put 2 dimensionals on the back of it. Take those backings off. And I'm going to line up this edge with the edge of the Very Vanilla on here. Stick that right like that. That looks nice. And then the last touch I want to do is I want to add a little doubled bow on top of my twine. I use the same linen thread. So I am going to use my Take Your Pick tool. I love this little tool. It's so handy. I'm going to use it to roll up a glue dot into a little ball. Hopefully you can see that on there. And I'm going to put that on the back of the knot of my bow, and then stick that on the linen thread on my card. Just kind of poke that underneath the knot like that. And there is the finished Casual Crafter card. Now let's go ahead and continue working on the Avid Crafter card. I have my piece of a Very Vanilla that was cut with a die, and to step it up even further, we are actually going to color with Stampin' Blends. I love Stampin' Blends. They make me feel like a real artist because I don't I'm not very much of an artist, but the combination of the stamps and the blends makes me feel like an artist. So what I'm going to do, I have a couple of different colors here. I've got dark and light of the soft suede, I've got the dark and the light of the Daffodil Delight, and then I have the dark pumpkin pie. Now when you use Stampin' Blends, you want to make sure that you have a piece of paper underneath you so you're not coloring on your desk or something, because the blends, the alcohol ink will bleed through to the back side. I'm going to begin using the dark soft suede with the bullet tip, and I'm going to color the center of my sunflower and along the edge of the center. Okay, then I'm going to take the soft suede with the brush tip and blend all that in. Okay, you know what, while I have these out, I'm going to go ahead and do the same for all the centers of my sunflowers. Doesn't look like I have a center on that one. Okay, next I'll bring in my light Daffodil Delight with the brush tip, and I'm not going to be too careful about this. I'm just going to kind of scribble some color on. I'm not being too precise at the moment. If there's some white spaces, that's okay, because we're going to be adding more color. So right now I'm just trying to get down some yellow of the sunflower down. Not too worried. Just putting down some color right now. Okay. Next, I'm going to come in with the dark Daffodil Delight, again with the brush tip, and I'm just going to kind of flick up on the ends of all the petals. Just adding a little bit of darker color. I'm not doing any blending yet. We'll do that in a little bit. I'm just adding a little bit of the darker color where those lines are in the petals of the flower. I'm following the artist's guide on those lines. So see, already that looks wonderful. Now I'm going to come in with the bullet tip of the pumpkin pie and just go along the very edges of those petals and a little bit in where the lines are. I'm just adding a little bit. I'm going to concentrate on the ones that are underneath other petals. So we're adding a little bit of dimension with this contrasting color. Not adding a lot, just a little bit, but a little bit, it makes a big difference. I'm going to do that all the way around on all of my petals. If you miss one, that's okay too. It doesn't have to be on everything, but just that little bit of color adds a lot. Then I'm going to go back to my light Daffodil Delight, and oh, I got that bullet tip, that's fine. I'm going to blend all that out. And now I can be a little bit more careful and fill in any white spaces. So it's actually good that I have the bullet tip on there. So we're just kind of blending it all in. Okay, isn't that nice? Okay, so we're going to do the same thing on the other flowers. I apologize if this video is getting so long. I don't know how to edit videos, so I don't know how to speed up my coloring, so I hope that you'll bear with me, but you'll see exactly what I'm doing and see that it is not difficult and you do not need to be that precise, and you'll still come out with a beautiful result. Beautiful looking sunflowers. And now I'll go back in with the light, or the dark Daffodil Delight, and just flick in some color on the petals. Just quickly adding a little darker color. Okay. And then again with the dark pumpkin pie, just adding a little bit of this in the shadows of the petals, just to create a little bit of contrast, to create some depth in your sunflower. Maybe we'll add a little bit along the edge of the center. And I'll go back to my Daffodil Delight, the light one, and blend all of that together. Okay, and we'll just do our last flower. Scribbling on the light Daffodil Delight. I'm going to come in with the dark Daffodil Delight and flick some color. Just a little bit of the pumpkin pie. We don't have much on this one because we don't have the center of the flower, so we're just going to add a little bit in the deep shadows of these petals. Go back to our Daffodil Delight light and blend all of those. Okay, isn't that pretty? I just think that's so pretty with all those different colors in there. And I swear, that makes me feel like an artist. I think that looks so nice, so lovely. So just like in our other, let me pull this in. Just like in our our Casual Crafter card, we're gonna add a mat of Misty Moonlight. This is just a little bit bigger than the die cut. It is actually 3 inches by 4 1/8. So we'll go ahead and glue. See how it goes through the back side? That's why you want to make sure that you've got paper protecting your desk, your work surface. I'm going to use liquid glue to add this piece just like before to our matte piece of Misty Moonlight, and I can wiggle it around and get it nice and centered. Okay, I'll pull in this card base that has the added texture, and again we'll add some dimensionals on the back. Okay, I'll pull the backings off of these dimensionals. And same as before, we're going to put it about equal from the bottom and the side. Stick that on there, and just like before, I've got a little linen bow that I'm going to add with a glue dot. So I'll roll up the glue dot with my Take Your Pick tool and add that to add that to my card like that. Now we need the sentiment. You'll notice on this sentiment of the Casual Crafter card, we cut the banner, but for my Avid Crafter, I have already pre-stamped and die cut out of Very Vanilla and using the Tasteful Touches. Actually, I'm not sure what it's called. It's called Tasteful Labels dies. These dies right here, I used this one. So I've already added dimensionals on the back of that. So I'll take the dimensionals off of there. And again, I'll line up the edge of this one with the edge. Let's go ahead and put the corner on the edge of that. Add it right there. So there are two cards, one for the Casual Crafter and then one for the Avid Crafter. They're the same exact layout, the same pieces and parts. I just used some extra dies and some embossing folders on this, and some blends on this card. So I hope you can see how you can take the same stamp set and really step it up using some additional tools. But if you don't have those additional tools, you can still make a very lovely card. So thank you again so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.